If I were to tell you that blacks once had a great culture which exceeded the culture of whites, you'd probably find that pretty incredible. But we're talking about the ignored truths of history. Those of you who've been watching this show may perhaps recall that several weeks ago we talked about the fact that most of the Jews alive in the world today may actually be descendants of Russian converts. Now, Jews like to consider themselves to be descendants of Israel. So the facts that Russia was once a Jewish nation for 500 years, in fact, and that most Jews who are alive today may be more closely descended from Attila the Hun than from King Solomon, these are facts which are just glaring facts, and it's incredible that such things could be ignored. And the question of how such things could be ignored has an answer, and the answer is collusion. All the parties involved have silently agreed, even perhaps without ever talking to each other, they've silently agreed to just not discuss this subject. In the case of the Russian Khazar Jews, it's embarrassing and frightening to Jews to consider the possibility that they may actually be descendants of converts and may have very little Israeli blood in them. In the case of the Russians, it's a horrendous embarrassment to them to admit that for 500 years, in the Middle Ages, Russia was a Jewish nation. So they just ignore it. It's collusion. Now, if I were to tell you that blacks, for as many centuries as whites have been superior, if you want, in the Western world, that for just as many centuries blacks were superior, you'd probably find that hard to believe. And you'd wonder how such a fact could be hidden. And the answer is, again, collusion. The whites wouldn't want to admit such a thing, because whites like to feel superior and like to think that their superiority is somehow permanent, decreed by God. As for blacks, if you look into the black civilizations that we're going to take a look at momentarily, you find something pretty interesting. You find that those civilizations actually arose as Jewish civilizations, later to become Islamic civilizations. Now, we live in a nation where blacks are taught that Whitey got ahead by being a liar and a thief. So today's so-called black leaders get on the air and proclaim that the way to get ahead in America is for the black man to be a better liar and thief than Whitey. I don't know about you, but I've thought about this matter, and there's no question in my mind as to where these so-called black leaders come from. They were put up there by Whitey. Now, I'm not going to name any names. But the truth of the matter is that the roots of black greatness historically lay in Judaism